Yo, this is Alup. You got pretty big balls to watch Thorin's YouTube videos.
Now, when it comes to the idea of OG being the #1 team in the world, forget it. It's old hat. Get a new topic, why don't you? Sorry, slow it down. I just dissed it. No, I'm not going to do the whole conceit, but you know what? What I meant to say was, forget that old hate. They need some nootropics. See, because nootropics are chemicals that potentially can help your brain focus. And I think some of their players, quite frankly, seem to lose focus during the games. Because this is a team, OG, by the way, if you want to get 10% off your order of GamerSups, code Thorin at GamerSups.gg. OG is a team that has just been eliminated 13th to 16th place, IEM Katowice. Didn't make an impact on Blast, basically. And quite frankly, I've watched this team play since they formed in latter part of 2019. This lineup has run its course. It has seen the full lifespan it could experience. It has been bad, it has been okay, it's been ropey, it's been good at certain points in times, but not enough for the latter and too much of that middle portion. Because you look at the history of this team, this is not a new lineup. This lineup was formed on the 4th of December of 2019, and it was already the core of it being put together for months before that, because if you remember, the Star had a Berlin Major around like September, going into I think maybe early October. That period in time was when, maybe it was just September, that was when we had ENCE, caught Aleksib and Vitality, caught NBK basically as they were eliminated from the major. So this lineup was potentially, could have been happening for months and months before, but it didn't happen until December. But my point is, this is far from like a new project. Like that's 14 months together at this point in time playing Counter-Strike. That is longer than most of the great lineups in the history of Counter-Strike. I'm talking about the ones that won the majors, eras, all sorts of crap like that. Then you look at the results they've had. They were whack early on. Remember, they couldn't even win a CS Summit where like NATO Safix replaced Woxic and then Carrigan even left in the final. Like, they didn't even make the final of that tournament. Then they had the Blast Spring, which was still on LAN in early 2020, where they like shocked the world a little bit, beat out that group that had EG in it, but obviously lost to G2, who were monsters. We came online, took them a few months to get going. It wasn't until CS Summit, one of the RMRs, they finished 3rd place there. They had a top 4 at DreamHack Summer Europe, not as stacked as like the Colognes of the world and the RMRs, but still a pretty good tournament. Then they had their big runs where it was IEM New York Europe division. They made it to the final, came 2nd place. Then at Flashpoint 2, obviously a tournament like probably the least stacked of all these I've mentioned so far, they finished 2nd place. The problem is, those realistically, those sort of 4 results, then maybe the group stage LAN portion of Blast in 2020, those are realistically the only meaningful results they had. Like, who really gives a fuck about just a top 8 at a Cologne and nothing else? Like, it's not that meaningful. And then, consider this, like, they were never supposed to be a world beater. When they made this team, I even told many people, like, guys like Poison, Yampy, those are supposed to be the last people, not fucking ISSA. And then Mantu, they just pulled completely out of nowhere and turned out to actually be a good player. Like, they were supposed to basically have a nice set of pieces with some potential. And then I looked at them like I looked at the Cloud9's roster, like, yeah, you've got some good pieces here, including some of the hard pieces, like in their case, maybe Alex and Esatag or whatever. But the question is, when are you going to get to the pieces that are going to make you a world beater? Cloud9 didn't do it yet, and OG never has, as far as I can tell. Because let's be real, like the idea that they're going to develop and show their potential, like they've already shown it, it's happened already. That's what their rise was, from a team that was like okay online with the odd upset potential to like a legit top 10 team in the world, to making finals of tournaments that you potentially win. But even in their best moments, you see how underwhelming they can be contextually. So that IEM New York final sounds great. Wow, European division, you made it to the final. Yeah, it sounds great until you know in the final you were playing against FaZe Clan, who already knew Nico was going out the door. That was his last tournament, and they still beat you without a proper fucking team set up. Then you go to Flashpoint 2, right? Coming 2nd place there's pretty good, obviously great prize money, etc. But the team they lost to in the final, Virtus Pro, quite frankly, they looked like they choked big time, made some really poor decisions on the final deciding map, was a team they'd already beaten earlier in the tournament. They were in fact the only team to have beaten Virtus Pro. I know Mad Lions came close, but they didn't close it out. So again, that was a chance where it's like, you're supposed to win that tournament. You're supposed to win both of these tournaments if you're OG and you have real super like world beater potential going forwards. Their step up was already pretty big. Like, it was comparable, not quite as extreme, to what Mouse Sports did. You go from being like, you know, like the 11th or 12th best team to like, what the fuck, now we're in the top 5, now we're concerned with the best teams, now we can in theory beat anyone on the right day. Like, I think if you look at that, it's not going to then happen again. That already happened, especially when you look at some of the things that hold them back. So, like, let's look at their lineup a second and consider who they have in their team. So they have Aleksib as their IGL, I think a sick in-game leader, and due to the fact I've been able to hear his comms at a bunch of tournaments and talk to him a little bit, really good mind for the game. Like, he is doing so much, I would say, of the strengths that their team has. Like, in my opinion, he is like 80% of their style of play and their strengths as a team. Then you come, like, individually, the best player on the team is Valde. He is a very good player, not least because he's playing some spots that are fucking shit spots to play, especially on CT side, but he takes responsibility for them. He performs above and beyond the level he should, and just even in terms of the stats, you'll see he's a very strong player right now in Europe. So I think he's a really good piece that could be in much better teams than OG even. Man2, as I always say, has been a revelation as an AWPer, one of the players of 2020 that, just because we weren't on LAN, people didn't really realise how ridiculous it was. This guy came from nowhere and is suddenly like a top AWPer in Europe. And then add in the fact that we were told by, I think it was Toby, or was it actually, no, it was actually Aleksib on Stratbook, which was, he said that apparently Man2 wasn't even an AWPer in alternate attacks the team before. It's just he swapped to it to come into OG. So this guy's development has been incredible. And again, by all accounts, this is a guy who has a great teammate personality. Doesn't sound like he has caused any problems, never had any issues when I was listening to him in the comms. Then we'll look at the other two. So NBK, I see him as kind of the glue guy, as a vet. He's someone who's been around the longest. He's the most decorated. He is a champion. He's done it in many, many different teams. He can help the IGL with ideas because he's been an IGL and wanted to be an IGL for much of his career, including working with some of the great IGLs in the game, major winners, etc. He also, if you haven't heard the comms, like many of you won't, helps out ISSA on CT side. Classic example would be when they play Inferno. He basically sort of like tells ISSA like where to go, what setups to do, what's maybe coming, and as a result maybe levels up ISSA's game sense in that regard. ISSA himself is supposed to be one of the stars of the team. He should be one of the guys leading the stats and with a really great eye test because he's supposed to be a mechanical player, but quite frankly I think he's the most underwhelming player in this team. He's the most obvious person who is surplus to requirements and I think would be the easiest to replace. So my issue here is, right, so Aleksib comes from Finland. And in the context of being cut from ENCE, the only team to ever be good from Finland in CSGO, this is actually a good team for him. Like, being in a top 10 team is still a pretty cool spot to be in. He could potentially go further in the future. I think he could do so much more, but I also get the sense when I hear some of the comms issues, like he's maybe not the biggest authority figure as an IGL, so maybe he's not ready in his development as a person or as an IGL yet to really take control. Maybe he's still kind of learning his footing, and therefore OG is an appropriate current level team for him. I think NBK is at the point in his career where he's had such a long career, such a fantastic career, and he's changed roles to more of the sort of sacrificial bitch roles, that realistically this is the level of team he's going to be on. Like, I doubt he's going to be on a world #1 team again, unless it's exactly the right kind of team like Vitality almost was in 2019. Man2 is just new. I mean, this realistically last year was his first year anywhere near tier 1. So I don't know if he's going to go much higher. Certainly he's got very promising potential if you look at what he already developed into. The problem is this. In my opinion, if we go to LAN tomorrow, he is trying to make what I consider the hardest jump up in World Counter-Strike, which is being a tier 2 AWPer who goes to LAN and has to face the best AWPers in the world on LAN. That is so difficult. That is how you get fucking smacked. It is a lot easier to be a rifler in that sense. So that's the problem there, is if we get the rest of the OG team, which, listen, you have to make a lot of changes before Man2's the guy on the chopping block. If the rest of the team's flawless, then maybe he could have an issue. But at that point in time, that's when you can upgrade, or when at that point in time he either develops into that player. So you can cross that bridge when you get to it. Right now, he is far from a problem in this team, in my opinion. Beyond the fact that, yeah, he's not the most experienced player, and that style of play is going to dominate tier 2 and tier 3 AWPers, but you can have your issues against tier 1. But even then, I see him developing as time goes by, and he's still very, very young in his career. I think ISSA, personally, is already playing above his pay grade. I don't think he's this level of player. When he was in that Hellraisers team, people always used to say, it's all about him and Woxit going off. Like, bullshit. It was just about Woxit going off. ISSA almost never did it, even when we were on LAN, and he didn't have these, like, ping issues. Something against him as a person, but although actually, as a teammate, it seems like he talks too much and doesn't have very many good ideas and gets in the way of other people's ideas. So I guess I have some sort of an issue with him as an individual based on the comms I heard. As I said before, I think Valde is the player who's literally looking at this team and going, why the fuck am I in this team? Like, yeah, it's good, but you know what? I've been to this level with North before in the past. Like, Valde is a player who could be in many, many much better teams than OG right now, and I think make those teams better. That's how good he is, and that's how incredible he's playing from the kind of role he has within OG. Like, when you've got a player like him and Aleksib, you've already got, like, the basics sorted there. Now we need a really strong star player. Man2 currently is doing his job, and then maybe a vet. That's about it, right? So you look at issues they have. Let's just start with players, shall we? I'll say ISSA doesn't doesn't do enough in any regard to be in this team, in my opinion. He doesn't frag enough. The stats will show you that. He doesn't have the raw impact. He's not some monster entry player. His game sense seems quite weak. He talks over people, including the fucking IGL. I mean, if people didn't get it about what I was trying to... I've overtly said it, but I've even subtly hinted at it. Like when we had that segment on Flashpoint 2, I'll see if I can find it and link it, where basically I make a joke to ISSA that like, wow, that Aleksib guy's a fucking genius, isn't he? When I'll just listen to his comms, you know, I think, fuck, I'll really listen to this guy. I'm picking some things up. Like, you know, what about you? He basically just goes like, yeah, but you know, I have ideas. It's like, I mean, you don't get it, mate. Like, your ideas aren't good enough. I've heard your ideas. They aren't fucking good. Like, most of the time, you would literally do better for your team if you stayed quiet or just ask questions for things you don't understand in the tactic. Because what I hear is I hear Aleksib doing an amazing job. Occasionally, Valde will have a decent comm. NBK has good information, but doesn't seem as good with like actual like strats and things to do. Maybe just calls like a good thing to do on CT side. ISSA's comms, as far as I can tell, were largely worthless. And Manchu just keeps his mouth shut and fucking shoots people with the AWP. So one of the big problems I have is I think just removing ISSA's from the comms immediately gives you an upgrade. Then consider this. Like I alluded to before, I think he's the most easily replaceable because he's not a super smart player and his experience doesn't seem to really show in the game. I actually think he's someone where, beyond someone who's an arsehole, you can replace him with any young mechanical talent from FPL, in my opinion. That is exactly the sort of player I'd get. I wouldn't even pay a buyout. I'd just go and get someone right now. Now, in terms of like, am I going to replace anyone other than ISSA? I think just ISSA alone already could make you like a top 3, top 4 team. If you get a skilled player there and you put him into that position and he can frag. If you also want to go a step further, the other person to replace would be like MBK. Like, he's not giving you big numbers. He's mainly there if he can fit the team well, which seems like maybe 67% of the time it looks like he does, but it looks like sometimes he has his issues or his clashes with Aleksib in terms of how they're seeing the game. The comms I've alluded to in this video, and I've alluded to every time I talk about the squad, because they're a team I got to hear about from a lot. Consider this. I heard them in early 2020, when they're like a month, 2 months old, and they had massive problems with the comms, and as I said even then, Aleksib, it's when he basically literally told people, like, shut the fuck up, and then he would call every round. That was when they do those God tier T-side Inferno comebacks. They still had those issues in November of 2020. Now, that coach, Ruggers, obviously worked on this. Obviously, Aleksib must have had these conversations in team conversations. I've talked to some of the players, even publicly. They are clearly aware of some of these issues. They just haven't been able to resolve it. So in my opinion, that's a personnel issue. You're not spending 2 years just to fix the fucking comms in your team, right? These were some quite messy comms, despite the fact one player, at least in the comms, was given amazing calls. Now, I will say, one thing I've been trying to think about is maybe one of the reasons why Aleksib doesn't just start the game telling people to shut up is maybe he needs to get a feel for the game before he gets that confidence in his reads to tell someone, I'm going to talk about right now, you're not going to talk at all. Maybe he's like a Stanislaw in that sense, where sometimes Stanislaw takes a few rounds and he looks really lost, and then when he hits it, flips that switch with the mid rounds, then all of a sudden he takes over the game. Maybe some of that's going on. I'll say as well, I do think MBK and Valde overcome a little bit, but again, if this guy doesn't sound confident or if he isn't asserting himself, well, then they're going to come with their ideas. It makes sense, right? That dynamic has to be worked out by everyone involved. They can't just be the coach just to, or me as the coach going, shut the fuck up, you guys. Like, why isn't this guy telling me to shut the fuck up if he's the IGL? Like, that's got to be a part of it, in my opinion. That's another level to being an IGL. It's an area where Carrigan with people like Nico had his issues. If I'm Carrigan, I just tell Nico to shut the fuck up, get his fucking breadhead in the server and just shoot people. I'll worry about what we're doing with all the tactics, mate. You don't know shit about that. But the problem is, if Carrigan doesn't have that personality, then all of a sudden he's getting toyed with by Nico, isn't he? I think in terms of team play, considering you'd hope with this weird mix of players, well, they've at least got to have like a good style that works. Not really. I think actually they're pretty ropey in terms of like team play. The nationalities are all over the place. There's no synergy there. It's a very weird mix of personalities. I actually feel like sometimes there's a lot of people who just want to have a say but aren't authority figures, which can be an issue in a team in general. So I also feel like it's a team by committee. Sometimes I think that fucking sucks. I hate that approach to the game. So I actually think team play wise, mate, this is one of those teams where I could tell you just based on who's alive if they have a chance to win like the 2vx situation. If it's certain players, it's never happening in a million years. So, and then you look at the style that the team has, one of the best elements, really. The problem is, when I've heard the comms and I've really gone back and watched the games over again, I think it relies way too much on Aleksib in terms of winning games. Like, there's a reason this team has had so many 3-map losses and has such a hard time closing out close games. Because the problem is, people like Aleksib play really well, read the game, make smart calls. People like Mantu frag out. Valde just plays generally a great all-round game. And then ISSA, and sometimes some of the others, they will just sometimes straight up throw around or a situation. And it's like nothing else went wrong in the round, but that person couldn't get a basic kill, just did a move that didn't make sense, was out of sync with someone else, didn't follow up correctly, and the round is just gone. Like, at the tier 1 level, we're not just talking about being like 10th best in the world. You're trying to be like a world beater. You're trying to be like a top 5 team in the world with consistency and then stack trophies. You can't do that. You're not going to get away with that against Astralis. You're not going to have the firepower to play against Na'Vi, and fuck playing against Siwoo's team that has so much experience stacked, all the same nationality generally in terms of like culture, etc. Like, there's no edges that you have over these teams. So why wait for FaZe to upgrade with Carrigan? Like, G2's already got Nico through the door. I assume they'll probably do a move soon. We hear Team Liquid's added in for like, mate, you're just sitting around waiting for other teams to improve and get better while you're just stuck in the same place. You even look at their map pool, I think it really betrays the problems they had over this like 14 months together and as a squad, because what are their good maps? What are the maps that they're classically expected to do well on? Inferno, Dust 2. These are basic bitch maps. These are the maps everyone plays. These are maps that have elements of pod control. These are maps that if you're just good at mid-rounding, you automatically have a great chance to win. Like, this is just Aleksib, guys, and then letting the other people frag people. That's it. Like, Nuke is just basically down to how well Aleksib just like single-handedly fucking enders games the whole map. They're not a great team on Nuke by any means. Train has always been a weakness, and one they've never been able to plug, even though because they never play Vertigo, anyone who plays Train can just go ahead and pick into that and basically have a map win over OG, realistically, if you're a top 10 team. So you look at the maps, like, where the fuck's their overpass? Where's a strong Nuke for them? Why haven't they got Train in the bag? I've seen some of these maps in the past on Aleksib teams, in other squads that these guys have played in, Valde, North, like, this just shows me the flaws that this team has. And they were never that godlike on those maps anyway. Like, they never had an Astralis type Inferno or a Dust 2 that's like, fuck, you gotta stay away from, like, no. They never had that, guys. They never did. So in my opinion, they're a team that is overdue for a cut. The question is, will they do it? Because I have my issues there. Like, I look at NBK and Aleksib, even though NBK can be a guy who can be ruthless, like, he's not really in a position to ask for cuts, is he? Because he might be one of the people on the chopping block. So think about it. NBK and Aleksib were basically cut in a manner they think was unfair and too soon in working lineups. So they've got history and baggage that suggests they're not going to be in favour of radical quick cuts, are they? ISSA's unlikely to want to, because first of all, I don't know if he could conceive of, you know, what the point would be. And surely even he would know he's the one that's going to get cut. Mantu's too new, I think, to really have a strong opinion on that. He doesn't know what it's like to play real tier 1 Counter-Strike beyond this last year. And I have no idea where Valde's head's at. Valde really put up with a lot of shit in North, in my opinion. I think he could have made different moves earlier on. I've even told him privately, like, I wouldn't have gone to this team, or I'd have left this team after, you know, not that many months in if I could have gotten out if I were you, mate. So, I don't know. I hope, though, that someone looks at this squad and realises this isn't like, oh, yeah, we're at like an 8 out of 10 and we can go to, like, no, this is it. You've capped out. You plateaued. If anything, the other teams in the world are getting better, but there are some really good pieces. At a minimum, if you just start this team, Aleksib, Valde, and you go forwards, you've already got some great pieces to build a potential world number 1. If Mantu sticks around and is still good, you've already got 3 out of 5, and those other people is like an old school vet that could be anyone, that could have been all these big name free agents you see now. Then you just need a guy who frags out with a rifle who has mechanics. They are literally 10 a penny in Europe right now. Go to FBL. You will see a ton of them. Half of them speak fucking Russian. Wouldn't matter. You know what? I'd rather a guy just spoke Russian and we just ignored him than ISSA speaks in English and we actually understand what he says and have to fucking pause and let that go in our brain. Again, it's just the way it is. Like, I think this team has the pieces to be like 3rd best team in the world. This particular 5-man line ain't ever going to do it though, and I don't care what online rankings tell you. This video was kindly supported by Lager15, Pronogo, Andrew, Animosity, ErikHillestad, Andreas Kroknes, Jensen Goh, Hades, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, Dean Tanglis, Tobias Bernasconi, Alexander Rao, and as always, a special thanks goes out to my boy Jerky's Minion. Do you want to ask some sort of a topic or suggest the guest for some upcoming content I have? Do you want to know something in my monthly video AMA? Do you want teasers, see who the next guests are for my content? Or maybe you want to take part in one of those lengthy audio discussions with me? Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Illuminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.